Welcome back to the Turn on the Music podcast. This is episode 8. My name is Kyle, and as always, we have CJ. How are you, sir?
I'm good, but is this episode 8 or episode 9?
9.
You said episode 8.
I know.
So this is Kyle and CJ, and this is episode 9. Oh, it's too funny.
Yep.
And it just goes to show how our weeks are going.
Yeah.
That's good.
It's good.
Yeah.
It's good.
Episode 9.
Good. So
That's crazy. We have episode 9, and we have, for this book, there's what? I think there's like 3 or 4 more chapters.
yeah, it sounds right.
3 more chapters to finish.
But what's weird is we're 66%, according to the Kindle, we are 66% done.
Well, chapter 10 is a ridiculously long chapter.
Yeah.
It's like,
And ironically, it's about nothing.
ironically, yes. That's funny. You made a good joke there.
I sure did. So, what have you been listening to this week? Anything new and spectacular?
I was listening to Victor Wooten. Been listening to the book, the Spirit of Music book. I listened to some Corey Wong.
Cool.
And I listened to some Rebirth brass band.
Nice.
And very much enjoy the music.
Good.
And then I did some YouTube searches and I found Victor Wooten playing with Corey Wong.
Did you find the live stream that they did?
No, I saw it, but I didn't play it yet. So I
haven't watched it.
I was gonna check that out. This was just one song, and then yeah, that was it. I think that was
cool.
It. I just didn't realize they were on tour.
Mm-hmm.
February and March of this or February through March of this year, like these past few.
Yep.
Yeah. So that was pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome.
Yep.
How about yourself?
Still Corey Wong and Rebirth Brass Band.
Nice.
So,
very cool. They're strong. They're good. They're and with the weather
Yeah.
changing, they kind of fit that.
They do.
That atmosphere of good, upbeat, fun
Mm-hmm.
music.
Yeah, and the awkward thing about recording on Wednesday nights is, Tuesday our podcast comes out, so I listen to it while I drive just to make sure everything was right.
Right.
And then Wednesday, the one podcast that I still listen to comes out, so it's like Tuesday, Wednesday, I don't listen to music in the car, so it's like.
That's too funny. Well,
and we recorded on Saturday, so it's not like I had a lot of time in the car to listen. So,
Yeah, that's funny actually. But like I said, I've been listening to the audiobook a lot, so I haven't even listened to that much music myself. I've been more focused on just getting that book in my head because I got to go through it again.
Right.
Which I don't want to do because it makes me tearful.
Yeah. Yep. So we have measure 9 tonight, which is the chapter phrasing, which is probably my least favorite chapter in the book.
Really?
I think. Yeah.
Why?
Because the topic is difficult. The stuff that they talk about hits me hard, and I don't like revisiting it. Okay,
so your least favorite, not because of the context, but because of what the context does in the sense of.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yes, I get that.
Yeah.
It is a very I'm sure for most, but I would say a lot of people, it's probably a very hard hitting chapter if you're reading this book, depending upon how and why you're reading the book.
Right. So the catchphrase is anything including physical actions can be phrased. And I've talked about this a lot, maybe not a lot, but I've at least mentioned it in the podcast that phrasing is one of my favorite elements because you can phrase so many different things when it comes to music.
Right.
It's not just about, breathing, but you can phrase dynamics, you can phrase rhythm, and you can phrase all these different things. So it's one of my favorite elements to play with sometimes.
But one of the hardest chapters to read through the book.
Yep.
Very interesting. You are a complex male human being.
I'm something all right.
Maybe not human.
So shall we get into the book?
I don't know. Are you sure we can do this? You sure we can get through this?
No, I'm not.
So the chapter continues after Victor, Michael, and Clyde leave the accident and the healing of the person that was in the accident from the chapter before. And they arrive at Victor's house, and lo and behold, Uncle Clyde is already there sitting in Michael's chair. And at this point in this book, Victor's just doesn't faze him anymore. Like, it's like, I don't expect him to be anywhere else but in the chair if I'm not. So that's where it starts, and he kind of like he sees Uncle Clyde, and then he notices that he's speaking a little more clearly than in the dialect. And I think that's an important thing to note because of the fact that his intentions when he's speaking are different when he speaks in a different form or dialect or whatever we want to say.
And what's interesting is it relates to the last chapter because he changes his tone.
Right. Exactly.
Essentially.
Right. So I don't know where you like start.
Page 180 is where I first have something.
Okay, so go ahead because that's where I kind of have first have something.
Let me figure out.
So good. The Kindle's so good. Not sponsored.
The problem with the Kindle is because I highlight so much in it that when you go to try to turn the page, it sometimes picks up the highlight like you want to edit the highlight.
Right.
So, I don't know where they're. So I'm just going to start reading. So Michael says, actions as well as words are vibrations, and how we put them together can produce different vibrations, sort of like notes. An individual note sounds one way and produces a certain vibration. A group of notes put together produces different vibrations. A group of chords will produce altogether different vibrations. For example, a group of... Sorry. Went to turn the page, it didn't work. Oh, no, not again. Come on. Hang on.
I'm going to let this be a dramatic pause because I know exactly where you are in the book and I could read.
For example, vibrations can produce a scale. It can be a major, minor, diminished, or any type of scale. These scales produce different sounds and feelings. A longer group of notes, scales, chords, or words strung together is called a phrase. Now, a phrase put together in a particular way can cause miraculous things to happen.
I think the only thing that I would out of everything that I underlined, I would say this. Uncle Clyde said, so understand this. Certain vibrations and situations can be created by the words and phrases we use. That's why we choose them carefully.
Right.
And I think that kind of like, because of what all you just read, like kind of leads into that. But it's true. Vibrations are a big thing in anything. Because we all vibrate. We all resonate at a certain speed. And that's just the same thing for anything else in the world. Everything has a vibration to it.
Yep.
It's just not everybody is susceptible to feeling that vibration. Is that the word? Yeah. Not everybody feels it. Not everybody senses it. Some people are more sensitive to it than others.
Maybe the word is receptive.
Receptive. I think it's better. Yeah, totally. They're not as receptive to it. Right. Because they may feel something but not be aware of what that vibration, what that is.
Right.
Whereas other people are aware that the vibration that is causing their change in mood or whatever, their understanding of it, they know where it is. And whether you want to call that person an empath or whatever, there's things that go to it.
Yep.
Which is funny because in the next paragraph, he goes, the common person relates phrases to words only, which is true. And then he says, we as musicians go a little further, and this is Uncle Clyde speaking, and add notes into the phrase category. So I think in one episode I talked about how breathing, I was told to breathe for the sentence you're going to sing. And that's all the breath that you need. You don't need more than that. So whatever breath you would take to say the sentence, is only the breath you should need to sing, because if you control your breath properly, you will have enough breath to sing that line. I think that's interesting because that also changes that place.
Unless you're singing Bach, in which case you might not have enough breath.
Yeah, no, I know. I'm not saying it goes for everything, but that's just
notes for one syllable. And, you know.
But it's pretty accurate when it comes to a lot of what you're saying. But I agree with you, and that changes your phrasing.
Yeah, it does.
And that's as a singer. As an instrumentalist, it's even different, more different.
Yeah. Yep.
And every
More
instrument.
differenter.
What?
I said more differenter.
More differenter. We're just gonna make up words and put them out into the Urban Dictionary and see if people grab them.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, you know, when you have a woodwind instrument versus a brass instrument versus a percussive instrument versus a string instrument, which could also be percussive, you know, and all that stuff. And I think that no matter how you phrase the instrument that you're using, can change that phrase.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
That's just my take.
Yeah. So the one line that sticks out to me is, now a phrase put together in a particular way can cause miraculous things to happen. Like, what miraculous things?
Are you asking that as a rhetorical question, or are you really curious?
I'm curious just to know if you have an answer.
Do you have an answer?
I might. I don't know that I could formulate it into words, but I kind of have an answer.
I think that it boils down to, I look at it this way. How you say a word can mean completely different things. Mm-hmm. And how you say it, meaning like, I can say to a dog, come here, quietly, and the dog may come. I can yell at the dog and be like, come here, and the dog may not come. Right? Because there's a different tone, but there's also a different phrase to those two words. Yep. And that receptiveness to that phrase plays a factor. You know, when you're talking to a kid and you're telling the kid, come here, and you're doing it in an angry tone, the kid's not going to want to come over there. But if you quietly turn around to the kid and be like, come here, I got to talk to you for a second, the kid's going to walk over because they're not going to feel intimidated or something to that extent. And the same thing with anybody at any age, really, you know? So I guess in a sense, they say that if you phrase things properly, you'll get the response you're looking for. That's my take. Is that your take?
I think that's one of my takes. I think the other take is that, you know, a phrase musically, a phrase that is performed can generate a certain response.
Right.
You know, I mean, you're going back to that Harry Connick Jr. Video that you found, you know, where the audience starts clapping. Like, he played a phrase that made them start clapping. He didn't say, all right, everyone, let's clap on 1 and 3, you know. Everyone just did it because of what he was playing. The phrase that led up to it, he essentially told them, I mean, they got it wrong, but, you know.
And then he adjusted that phrase and got them to clap on the beat that he wanted to.
Right.
And I think.
And there's.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. You're good.
I would say there's so much, like, one of the reasons I love Robert Randolph and the Family Band, and like the Lee Boys also. They're another great slide guitar group. Sorry, I hit a button. I thought I canceled the recording. I didn't. It's good. We're good. So the Lee Boys, I mean, you can, and Robert Randolph, you can hear them as they're playing, like, these phrases like bubble up from one of the players, and you can actually hear them like say that phrase to the other person and influence what they play, how they play, you know. And if you go back to one of my YouTube videos where I analyzed music as a language with 2 songs by Bella Fleck and the Flecktones, Big Country and Stomping Grounds, listening to Bela and Victor, like their phrases together, and Jeff Coughlin too, and how they influence. Like there's this one section where Victor and Jeff are playing a solo, and the way Victor phrases influences how Jeff responds.
Right.
So musically we have this communication, and you think about, first off, they're having a conversation using musical phrases, but like the emotion that can be generated by those phrases, like if you change the phrasing of that, you can change the emotion that's associated with it and what the audience feels.
Oh yeah, and you can change the direction
really cool.
of the song.
Yeah,
you totally change the direction and totally change the feeling of the song. You could start off with this happy, jumpy song and end up with this like angry song that everybody's like, oh, no, that's not right. Doesn't feel good.
Yep.
Totally. Again, it's also receptiveness of the person that's listening.
Right.
Some people just don't react to music the way others do. And some people react to it and don't know why they're reacting to it the way they do. I remember one of the conversations growing up, because my grandfather being an opera singer, music being a part of our lives in that capacity, of them talking about songs that would make them cry. Like, and not even like something that they're sitting there going to want to cry. It's just the way the song triggers whatever inside of their brain or their emotion, whatever. They just start crying. And there's songs that that are out there that every time I listen to them just make me tear up. And not everybody responds to music that way. But at the same time, a lot of people do respond to music that way, and they don't know why.
Yep.
And it's interesting, because is that the phrasing? Is it it's all the elements put together for phrasing purposes. So you could have a song that could bring millions of people together just because of the way it's phrased. I think that's what that kind of leads to, that miraculous possibility.
Yep.
Like, we don't even have to pick out different things throughout this chapter to talk about, because it's pretty much that conversation. It's just this whole idea of, he even says further down, he goes, you see, in all the elements of music can be phrased, not just notes. How to use these different elements is what you've been learning. So he's individually learning how to break down the elements and how to use them, and then he's learning now how to phrase them.
Right.
And then you think about the order of what you learn throughout the book. The next thing that he learns is space and rest. That's the next chapter.
Yep.
So you're going to learn all about this phrasing. You're going to learn how to connect everything, how to make everything work. And now we're going to teach you that you need to put space everywhere. And that is just as powerful. So it's one of those chapters that makes you go, what is going on in my life? And then he breaks down life, and he breaks down the days alive.
Yeah.
That was an intense. That's an intense paragraph or two.
Yeah, and this is, I mean, I've heard this done by so many different people in so many different ways, and this is where it starts to get difficult for me,
right?
And I think maybe you too, because, I mean, we both kind of said it before we got on, like we're not doing what we want to be doing, in a career,
right? I told you, I just told you, I want to retire. Like, like I'm ready to retire. Listen, I enjoy helping people. I will not say that that's not the case. I'm not saying that to give a cliche answer. I really do enjoy helping people. Even people that make me upset, I will help them. Because I'm not I'm not going to be a jerk. I'm not going to tell you no. I'm going to make sure that you have what you need. And if you're going to be just as upset with me as you were before, and as you are after, fine. But that doesn't mean I'm still going to help you. I mean, we both experienced that. We've worked in fields where that has happened, and even off the bat, the person is just an angry person. And no matter what you did and what you say and how you help them, they still become this angry person towards you. And they're not receptive to anything. But I agree with you. It's one of those things where we know we're making a living, we know we're making money, we know we're able to survive, but at the same time, it's not what we want to be doing every day. And that's just, and then you question, like, what choices did I make that put me in this position?
And then you watch a show like House Hunters, and they're looking at these houses, like, oh, my budget's $5 million. It's like, oh, well, what do you do for a living? I pet caterpillars all day.
I know.
Like, what?
Yeah, it's like, what?
How do you get paid for petting caterpillars?
Yeah, like, and why am I not getting paid that money? Like,
right.
So I don't know if we want to read through this, but it basically breaks down, you know, if you're 50 years old, it tells you how many days you've lived, you know, and how many days you lived until you're 70. And there's this whole big breakdown of, so this is how many days you have, and then what a total of this days that you were sleeping, and this, it just breaks down how many actual days you've lived, meaning like actually lived, not in the sense of I was asleep, I was sick, I was an infant, I was. It's the days that you were at a point in your life where you were able to make conscious efforts and decisions of where you're going to go. Right. I don't think we need to read through all that math.
No, but I think one of the most important parts is towards the end of it, where he says, or where Uncle Clyde says, "Now listen here, son. How much of your precious little time is spent on really becoming who you choose to be? Do you know? Actually, all of it is, but you don't know that it's you doing the choosing. How much of that time is spent consciously making yourself better? Not much. We can probably count that time in weeks or even days." And that's one of the hard ones for me, you know, is reading that line, you know, and I've read it, I don't know, 20 something times at this point. You know, that's a hard one to swallow.
That is. It is a hard one to swallow. It's one of those things where it's kind of like, really? Am I wasting days? Am I wasting time? Am I wasting this and I'm wasting that?
Right.
Like, should I be sleeping anymore? Like, you know. Like,
right. It reminds me of that Seinfeld episode where Kramer decides to do the Da Vinci thing and sleep only 20 minutes every 3 hours. So he gets like 4 more hours to the day, and then he ends up, you know, falling asleep.
Right.
Wrecking everything. But yeah, anyway.
But it's true. You know, people do that. They try. Wait, you know. Yep. I know people that can take a 20-minute nap and be good to go. Like, and they can do it. Like, they can literally, like, I'll be talking to them and they can be like, 20 minutes later, they're back up.
Yep.
It makes me think of this one time I was in high school, and the band director, he was a big gentleman. He was a nice guy, but, you know, intimidating, but in a good way, like all that stuff. He's a big guy. He smoked. He did everything, you know, smoked cigars and all that stuff. And he's conducting. At some point, he conducts with his right hand, and he grabs his chest with his left. And he stops. The band still plays because that's hysterical. You need to leave that in. At one point, his right hand's up because he's conducting. His left hand grabs his chest right over his heart, and he stops. And I wasn't the only one who saw this. And he stopped for a few measures. We were still playing. We were still all on time, and he came right back in on beat. Like, I don't know how he did it. I don't know what happened. I don't know where he went. He could have had a minor stroke for all we knew. And he was just spot on coming back in on that downbeat, like 3 or 4 measures later. And I remember looking at I'm a saxophonist, so I remember looking at the person next to me who I knew well, and we were just like, did you see that? Yeah. So, okay. Just make sure, we were the and it blows your mind because, like, what happened at that moment?
Right.
You know, like, I know, like, sometimes when musicians play, they get into that zone, or what they say, that pocket, because I know that he talks about that. But what happens? Like, where are you? Where did you go? I want to know. I want to know that. Yeah. And that's what this, like, kind of makes me think. It's like, so everything we're doing is going to be making ourselves better, but I feel like, do they talk about mistakes and failure in this one? No, they don't.
A little bit.
It's more so in the second book.
Yeah. I
feel like this book was like, this is what's on my mind, and the second book is like, I just learned so much more new stuff, and I need to share it. Yep. Yeah. I did,
and that's kind of what he said to me when I met him. When I first found out that he was writing the second book, and he kind of said, you know, like, it's just the first book, but like deeper.
And but it's well done expanded. Though. You don't feel like you're reading the first book though.
No.
Yeah.
No.
They do say further down. I don't know if you had more to read after that. I did underline it. Ironically, it is italicized in the book. All things that I'm going to read this. This is read in Uncle Clyde's tone. All the things that you've held your mind to, you have accomplished or will accomplish. You can believe that. And all these time frames can be viewed as phrases. So I was thinking about that, and it's like, so the 3 years that I went to my master's considered a phrase.
Yeah.
The 4 years that we were in college, it was a phrase.
Mm-hmm.
So every and it's funny because I work in education. You essentially work at a university, so you're almost in that realm. I still think of the year as the school year. Like, it's hard for me to think of the calendar year from January to December. I constantly think, okay, the year is September to June, and then I have summers. And not that I have summers off. I'm just saying, like, mentally, I'm just so used to that that it's hard to turn that off.
And what's hard is, like, when I got here, because I started working for a school when I got here, I was so used to September to June, but, like, they were August to May. And it was like that, just that little change was like, whoa.
Yep.
And this is like where they start to get me back, like, cause, the page before is like, oh, this is really kind of grim.
And then, Victor acknowledges
Michael,
that.
Yeah. And then Michael says, there's only one reason you ever fail at anything, and that's because you eventually change your mind. That's it. Like Uncle Clyde told you, anything and everything you have ever decided to do, you have succeeded or will succeed at doing. It may take a day, a year, or 12 lifetimes, but if you hold your mind affixed on the idea, it will come forth. It has to. That is the law. So that, hearing that, it's like, oh, well, they're getting me back, but then they depress me even more later on. It's like, oh, this is...
I think I think it leads up to a reason as to why they put this back and forth at him.
Right.
But you don't know that until it comes to that conclusion, and you go back and forth. And then he goes further. They're talking more about that and failure and all that stuff. And Victor he does talk about how he didn't understand it at first, but when he started really thinking about it, he was like, okay, this all makes sense. I get what he's saying. And it's true. I was thinking about it too. The things that I failed at were the things I just didn't really care about.
Right.
Or not that I didn't care about them. It's just that they didn't fit in what I wanted to do.
Right.
I just wish I was better at the things that I like doing.
Right.
At the bottom of the page, of 184, after Victor explains his understanding, he said, Uncle Clyde interrupted my thoughts. So what I was saying before Michael chimed in is this. Your life, which is capitalized, the word, is made up of a string of many different phrases. Most of these phrases were put together unconsciously.
And I think that's what you were just talking about.
Yeah.
That our life is just a series of phrases. You can look at, like your college years as a phrase, or,
right.
A relationship as a phrase, or,
Which is true. I mean, you date somebody for 3 years, that's 3 years of your life. That's a phrase. Yep. Or a phase, because at some point they do say word phase. And they said it's kind of the same thing.
Yep.
And then he talks about, he goes back about the days on your planet and, make sure, are you making the right choices? And Victor says, I never realized that our time was so short. And Clyde goes, most people don't until it's too late. And then you're just like, oh man.
Yep. And this is where they start bringing you back down again.
Right.
Because then Michael says, call it life or call it music. There's no difference except most people's musical lifespan is much shorter. Well, thanks.
Yeah, right.
But it's true.
But I get what he's saying. And even on that end of it, because it just, and that's like we could read these things like crazy, but all this stuff, and then I don't have anything for a while because he talks about.
Well, he does. So he does kind of bring it back a little bit for me, where he says, and only when the separate. So it's
right.
Call it life, call it music. There is no difference except that most people's music lifespan is much shorter, and only when the separation disappears for you, meaning the separation between life and music,
right?
Music will become part of who you are.
Right. Right. And then there's the paragraph after I did mark. It says, you can see how setting up certain phrases in your life can produce desired results days, years, or decades later. Musical phrases can be set up in the same way. If you are playing a show, what you choose to play at the start of the night can determine how the listener will hear you later in the show. You can use certain musical phrases to set up his ear or his emotions for something you choose to play or do later. And I think Victor Wooten does a very good job at that in his albums.
Yeah,
because I feel like his albums, you listen to, oh, this is great, this is cool, and then like the second song comes in, oh, this is really cool, and then the third one comes in, or the fourth one, and it kind of mellows out in a good way. And like you hear these and you're like, oh, this is really good, and you're like, okay, cool, and then like the next song is a little more, I don't want to say aggressive, but a little bit more upbeat, and then the sixth song or whatever, it's back to that like funky playing, and it's every album I feel like has that.
Yeah, and I think some of it comes from Bela Fleck, because the first time I saw Bela Fleck at the Tilla Center, I remember Bela saying, our goal is to take you on a journey, and it might be outer space, it might be just across the country, but we're going to take you to a different place. And my goodness, they took you on a journey that night. It was, I mean, they were just all over the place, and it was out there at points, and in some points it was difficult to sit through because it was just so frenetic and just out there jazz, and then all of a sudden it came back together, and there it was.
But he set up your phrasing right at the beginning by saying, we're going to take you on a journey.
Yep.
And he wasn't even playing music.
I know.
And that's amazing.
Well, because he doesn't have that separation between life and music.
Right. Or he does, and he knew exactly what he was doing.
Right.
That's crazy.
So.
And then they start playing.
Mm-hmm.
Clyde
starts playing.
Uncle Clyde starts playing the harmonica. And then Victor wants to join him, but he just listens. Then he joins in. But at first he doesn't think Clyde is a great player. Mm-hmm. Then when he jumps in, he realizes he is. And then Uncle Clyde does all this stuff, and he starts playing in the pocket, as he calls it. Mm-hmm. And then Victor's like, oh my goodness, he's amazing. And he was kept playing. And then Uncle Clyde started doing all this crazy stuff. And then they stop playing. And he acknowledges the fact that he was an amazing musician, but you would have never thought that when you met this person under the bridge, because he was a homeless man, quote unquote. And didn't understand why he wasn't playing to make music or whatever. And asked him that, like, why aren't you doing these things? And Uncle Clyde's like, what did you do? He goes, what do you mean? You just heard me play. What did I do? And he was like, you played amazingly, blah, 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 blah. And he goes, but, like, what did I really do? And Victor's like, he's like, you set me up. And then he talks, you set me up. Yeah, you set me up. That's what you did. And you did it in a way that I didn't even realize it was happening. First, you started with simple phrases, simple repetitive phrases. And you made sure these phrases were familiar sound, singable, playable, right? Then you changed them. And he goes, first, I didn't think you were a very good player. And then your phrases changed in length, and it looked like you weren't even breathing. And then he's like, then you took it to the highest level possible. And then Clyde was like, you think that was the highest level? He was like, I could take you out of the galaxy. Mm-hmm. And then he goes, what you didn't notice was that I also phrased the tempo, which is what you were talking about, phrasing elements. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that's something that you had underlined or highlighted.
Yep, absolutely.
So I'll stop talking. You can enjoy that and talk that.
One of the things that I always focus on, especially in my choral groups, is phrasing of dynamics, because you can phrase the dynamics as a phrase, and a lot of what we do when we sing, and I guess play to a certain degree as well, but more because the way we talk, if you think about the way we talk, we generally start soft. There's a peak of our phrase, and then we kind of trail off at the end. So most of your vocal phrases are the same way. But I always focus on the overall piece too, because one of the things that you learn with good choirs is that they're never singing at 100% in terms of volume.
Right.
There's always a place to go. They're always usually like 75, 80%. But you don't know what your 75 to 80% is until you know where your loudest peak is in your piece. So, and then you have to think about like the different like genres of classical music, whether it be Baroque or classical, or
he put in quotes genre for the people that are not watching this on a video.
Because like if you think about Baroque music, the instruments back then didn't allow you to play as loud as the more modern instruments. Right. So it's like to be, because the way it was written, it was not written to sing boo,
Right.
there's a different style. So then you have the phrasing of that too, So each one is different. But, my whole thing was you need to have kind of that roadmap. And we talked a little bit about it last week, I think. No, it was the week before with Sam and Rhythm.
Right.
When I was talking with my kids when they're learning how to sight read. And like that's one of the things that we focus on. It's like the first thing you do is you look at what the shortest note value is so you can subdivide in your head. The second thing is then you look at the key signature, then you look at the time signature, and then you look at the overall piece. You look for things like accidentals, but you look for like the shapes, look for the the dynamic shapes, the phrasing, that sort of thing. That's how I approach looking at a piece for the first time. And I have a lot of friends who are studio musicians. I have a friend who played on like the Star Wars movies.
Oh, really?
The Phantom Menace and all those. The first like chapters 1, 2, and 3 of Star Wars. He played on all those. He played on the Lord of the Rings soundtrack as an upright bass player. And that's one of the things he always. His father was the one that taught me how to do all of that. And he said it's so important when you go into settings like that. Like that's what you need to do because you've got 1 or 2 chances to get it right. Otherwise, you're not hired again. That's
right.
it. You're done. So, being able to look at that, and that's what I was trying to stress on my kids. Like, that's what it's about. It's not about, he's like, there are times where I was playing wrong notes, but because I was musical about it, they didn't care. If I was strict and rigid about it and played every note but didn't play it musically, I would never get hired again.
Right. And I think that's an important thing is that we're so hung up on playing things perfectly and we lose the musicality of whatever we're playing.
Right.
And it's and it's funny because even for a singer you could hit a wrong note, but if you do it right, and I know that sounds right, hitting a wrong note right in the right way, no one's going to know the difference.
Yep.
You will maybe. The person playing next to you, maybe. I mean, that's the hardest thing to get past is like you're gonna make that mistake. It's gonna happen.
Yep.
And
sometimes it's a mistake that you can't control.
Right.
I remember there was one service I played where it was a first communion. There were a couple hundred people in the congregation. It was families of all these kids, and the organ started to cipher in the middle of a hymn. And what a cipher is, for those that don't know, it's there's a piece of leather that covers the note when it's not being played. A cipher is when the leather gets like sucked into the pipe because the airflow is wrong, and it kind of gets stuck, so air kind of leaks through it. Sometimes you get a full note. Sometimes it's kind of a really flat version of the note because there's not enough air going through.
Right.
So what I had was this note go in the middle of a hymn. And I was like, oh, God, what am I going to do? Because, like, the way you fix it is sometimes if you bang on the note enough, it, like, fixes itself. But you have to, like, go into the organ and, like, pull the little piece of leather out.
Right.
Well, I was in the middle of a hymn, and I was like, well, how do I make this work? So at the end of a verse, I just started improvising around this, like, note, and I made it musical. And I was able to, like, kind of caress the note and play the notes around it so it changed the air pressure around it. And eventually it fixed itself. But so I fixed the organ and made it musical at the same time. And I think that's kind of the way, phrasing works.
Well, yeah, but you also, like, you listened more than anything.
Yeah.
You try not to think about it too much, because if you thought about it too much, you probably wouldn't have succeeded. And let's take that word out of the equation for a second. Let's take succeeded out. You played musically. And you use that to fix the machine.
And what's funny is after that, I use that like in improvising. It's like, how long can I hold a note before someone realizes I'm holding a note?
Right.
Right.
It
was kind of a fun exercise.
That's
and
funny.
I put it in different voices, and sometimes I put it in the pedal, and that's an easy one. You just throw it in the pedal because it just vibrates the whole room. No one really cares. Right. But if you stick it as the top note and try and play around it, like that's hard to do.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Good. So. Anyway, sorry, I'm gonna stop nerding out.
No. But that's what but that's what it's about, though. Like that's what this whole thing is about. Is the idea of not letting what's happening at that moment freak you out and playing around. So whether it's life or music or whatever you're doing at that moment, I mean, I deal with anxiety. It at that moment when you're dealing with that anxiety, that's the only thing you can think of, and then it becomes like the worst thing in the world. And then on top of it, it starts bringing everything else around you, making everything else worse, and nothing could be bad.
Yep.
Like you could have $100 in front of you, but for some reason that $100 where you could use it to go buy something, you're like, oh my God, there's $100 in me. I don't know. Like it just becomes a bad thing.
Yep.
And you're trying to manipulate that time to be better.
Yep.
And that's hard to do because you overthink and you do this. But if you were to approach it the way you did in a musical way, maybe you could process that moment easier. I'm not like I'm not trying to simplify anxiety in any way, shape, or form. I'm just saying that is something you have to improvise around in your day. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes it gets you to the point where you just can't, and you have to stop.
Yep.
But that's creating space.
Yep.
So it's like we can relate everything to this. Oh man.
Yep.
And we were talking about. So Clyde talks about what he did to get Victor to do all these things. I don't know if we want to read through that whole entire paragraph.
No, I think the important thing is where he says the proper use of phrases allows me to gradually change your mind and body. Changing it all at once can cause your head to explode just like glass. All I do is set up groups of vibrations to produce the same or similar effects. But instead of one powerful vibration, I can use a group of vibrations. It can be done in the course of a solo, or it can be done over the course of a whole night. It can be done over the course of a few days if you want to. You can set up your listeners to hear or listen to a particular way on a night or later. And I think, going through it, if you're listening to us on Sunday evenings, I think that if you listen to Victor's whole catalog, the way we're playing it from start to finish, I think he's phrasing his albums kind of like that. He starts out really flashy to get your attention with Show of Hands. And then he's got these kind of fun funk folk songs. Right. And then he goes into jazz.
Right.
And then to kind of smooth it out a little bit. And then, it's Live in America. And then he kind of goes off on a tangent in Soul Circus, and then he kind of brings it back to his roots in palmistry. And then he gets really philosophical in Words and Tones. And then he comes out with Tripnotics, which is just straight up jazz fusion. There's just all of these different things that's creating this whole. I consider each album a phrase.
Of course.
So he's, creating his whole world based on these individual phrases or albums.
Right.
Which is interesting to think about.
But I think he's that conscious about it. In an unconscious way, maybe.
Yeah. I don't know that he sat down when he was doing a Show of Hands and having all the albums planned out in his head, but
no,
I think each of them has influenced the next one.
Exactly.
And he leaves it off in a way where he knows where he's going next.
Right. Exactly. Where did you read all that? What page was that on?
That was 189. Right.
That was down towards. Okay, I see where that is. Okay. That was all the yes, that came after This Ain't Nothing But Vibrations. Yes, okay, cool. I just make sure I'm with you because I missed it while you were reading because I was paying attention to you reading. And then, so this is what I think is interesting. Clyde turns around to Victor and says, you're at a special time in your life. You might say that you're ending one phrase and starting another, which we were just talking about with his albums. What direction you play this phrase in is completely up to you, and don't ever think that it's not. This is important. It's time for you to take control of your life with a capital L, and for you to accept that it is you who's in control. You understand? That hits. Because sometimes you don't feel like you're in control of anything that you're doing. But really you are. And then he talks about how musicians play a bunch of notes. That's okay.
But I think there's important stuff in there because, at least for me, I focus on the notes of life too much. And I focus on the tiny little things instead of the bigger picture.
Oh, me too. Yeah.
And I think it's interesting to think about, because this is kind of where it gets dark, but kind of hopeful at some points. It's like I think about all the times that I've scrutinized over a $20 purchase, and it's like, why? It's $20 in the grand scheme of things. It's not
because
scrutinizing, but it's like in my head, it's like, this is going to change everything if I can save this $20. It's like, but why? It's not.
It's not.
Stop.
Right.
Like,
and it's hard to
you're an
do.
idiot.
I mean, but yeah, I mean, I don't make big purchases until I sit on it for 3 months. Yet
Right.
someone else would go and make the purchase and then figure it out, and which you could financially do. You know, and sometimes you question like I typically don't make big purchases right away. I need a new monitor. And like this, this is funny because I'm talking about a monitor, but I need a new monitor. And I'm like, I found one on sale. And the only reason why I did it was because it was on sale and it was a deep discount. I'm like, you know what? It's worth it. So now I got to pay that. Like it stinks, but it's working out. I wouldn't be able to do some of the stuff that I'm doing without having this monitor in front of me. But I totally get that because like I want to buy, and I don't buy things for myself typically. I don't go out and just do that. I'll be more apt to buy something for somebody else. Right. And so I totally get that because you sit on that. But, you know, that's a big part of me too. I see little things, but sometimes what the problem is I see the buildup of little things. And my expectation is that something bad's going to end up happening because that's what I dealt with a lot in my life is that little things started happening and then that was like an explosion of a bad. And I need to start to take those moments and see the little good moments. Like, what did you spend the $20 on? You know?
Right.
Like I spent $20 on, you know, I don't know, let's just pick something out on a book, right? Why did I spend $20 on a book? I can't, but the book, I read the book and it's like, okay, this was the best $20 I ever spent.
Right.
Like I misplaced the second book, the Spirit of Music. I couldn't find it. I know I had it when I saw you back in April and I knew it was in that bag for a long time because I purposely kept it there. Could not find it. So I was like, you know what? It's a $17 book. I want it. I need it. So I spent the money. And now that I finished it on the audio version, I was like, okay, yeah, it was totally worth the $17 that I spent 3 times already. You know?
Well, it's funny because like I was making those chairs a couple of weeks ago and it was my biggest holdup was the chairs cost me $30 in materials, but the cushions cost me $70 a piece. And I'm like, I can't spend that. Like that, it wouldn't compute in my head. But like in the grand scheme of things, $70 for a cushion isn't that big of a deal.
Grand scheme of things, but have you sat outside and read on those chairs?
Oh yeah, yeah.
So take the monetary side of it out of that for a second.
Right.
And now you're outside sitting down reading.
Yep.
Like that right there, it takes us a moment to realize that. For example, I have the plant, you can't see it, you know, on the way the screen is, but behind me I have a plant. It's given to me by 2 really, really great friends. And it's a money tree. And I thought it was the coolest thing. And I'm not good with plants. I water this thing every week like I'm supposed to. And it's growing. And it can get to 4 feet tall from what I understand. Like I'm at a point where I may have to transplant this into a bigger pot again. You know, and it's funny because it's a plant. This one plant triggered my need of wanting more plants. There you go. See? For those who are watching this on YouTube, you can see the plant. If you ever watch us live, you'll see the plant. But, you know,
I'm Two-Face.
And what?
I'm Two-Face.
You are Two-Face. Actually, that'd be really funny if we can get like
Otherwise.
We're playing around with the camera. Sorry guys, for those who are listening. No, but
you know what I learned this week?
What?
It took a video game for me to learn this. I have extreme ADD.
Really?
Yeah.
Maybe she.
It took Zelda like the other day I was like, I'm going to get to Kakariko Village. It should take me about 20 minutes. 4 hours later, I still wasn't there. I was like, there's just too much to do. I was like, there's a Korok over here. I found a temple over there. I found Sting in the Sky. I found a chasm under the ground. And I still didn't get there. I was like,
wow.
Yeah.
No. That's
so.
Wow.
On a tangent. Sorry.
No. I get it. It's like when I was setting up my office, I was like, I'll be done in an hour, like 3 hours later. Because I kept doing it and I'm like, oh, I could do this better. I want to change this up. Well, I get it. But those are just phrases in the day. Oh, brought it back to the book.
Look at you.
This is one thing that I thought was interesting is Uncle Clyde talks about like Victor says, but you're in control of the phrases, but you release your control of the individual notes. But Uncle Clyde's like, I can control everything or not control anything. Like I have the ability to, and I feel like that brings it back to the yin and yang thing where you kind of have a balance of the conscious and unconscious. So you have the balance of the control and not have control. Yep. But he keeps focusing on the fact that if your phrase keeps coming out wrong, you may go down a level of individual notes to see what the problem is. Like, it's just interesting how they talk a lot about balance. Like it's okay to be in control, but it's okay to be out of control. It's a matter of how you balance that out. That's the scariest thing ever. And that's the scariest thing ever, especially in life. When you don't have control over something, it freaks you out. And sometimes you really have to say to yourself, okay, I don't have control over it. It's not me, or it's not something I can hold on to, or I got to just let it be and we'll see what comes out of it. It's hard.
Yep.
It's very hard. Yep. This is a very philosophical chapter. And I don't...
Then,
yeah, go ahead.
Michael and Clyde try to convince Victor that they're right and the other one's wrong.
Right.
And they go back and forth and try to confuse him. And Victor goes, wait, you guys are really confusing me. And Clyde says, perfect. You don't need to believe any of us, or none of us, as Clyde would say. You need to listen to us. That is all. And then Victor realizes that the whole point is that it's not that he's got these people teaching him, telling him what to do, but just giving him information and letting him formulate his own ideas to make his own decision.
Right. Right. And he goes on at the bottom to say, I should listen to all that you or anyone else has to say, then I make up my own mind. And I choose what I want to believe. And what my truth is. Ask the questions and let the experience talk to me. And then Clyde makes a comment about how he's not as bad as Michael said. And then Michael said something. I don't know if I'm going to read a little bit of the paragraph. If you believe what we say all the time, you will never come to your own realization. And your own realization is the only realization there is. If we tell you different things, you will be forced to decide for yourself. And your own decisions are the only decisions you should ever make. But when you can't decide, you will have to rely on experience. If you have no experience to draw from, you must trust your feelings. That is always always best, because your feelings are the only ones that will always speak the truth. And that hit, because I'm sitting here going, oh my God, that's totally what I'm going through right now. If you're still unsure, test all the theories to see which one works. Oftentimes you will find that more than one will work. But that still leaves you with a decision to make. Your decisions are best made by you and no one else.
And then Clyde says, that's what he just said, but with less words.
Yep.
And then Uncle Clyde says, you just need to listen to all of it. Keep your mind open to all the information. That'll help you make the best decisions. One bad decision today can cause you to end up way off course later on down the line. You understand? And that's another one that takes me back to, boy, I screwed up.
But see, the thing is and then at the end of the chapter he said, let's make some music. But the thing is did we screw up?
I don't know. And that's the thing, is I don't know.
Because everything that we do in our past leads us to where we are today. Whether we made a mistake or not, if we learned from that mistake, was it really a mistake?
Right.
And do we want to use that word mistake? They do use the word failure in the second book, but they use it in a positive context, because a failure is learning. And you're better off trying and failing than not trying at all.
Right.
And you hear that in the past and you're like, no, I don't want to take the chance. I don't want to take the chance. And then you say to yourself, like, why the heck didn't I take the chance? So you try to change your mindset moving forward, and it's hard to take the chance knowing that the possibility of failure is there because of what you dealt with. But I think for myself, in the past even couple of months, I've started trying things despite the fact of what I knew what the outcome was going to be. I was always one that if I can control the outcome, I'll do it. And that sounds horrible, but it's not that I'm a controlling person, but if it has to do with me and I can control the outcome and I can make sure the outcome is going to be a good outcome, I'm going to do whatever I can for that good outcome.
Yep.
But even on that end of it, I'm going to make mistakes to get to that outcome. So it's like, I'm tired. I don't want to keep doing that.
Yep.
That's me personally. I mean, that's just my thought and my opinion on the matter. Just like they said in the book, you can hear what I have to say and listen to what I have to say. You don't have to agree with me, but it may help you make a decision on how you want to handle things. Do you agree or disagree with any of that?
I agree with you.
Right? It's
Yep.
We could have a whole podcast just on philosophy and talking, and
Yep, we could.
it's like we're doing that with the book club. That was an intense chapter.
It was.
It's an intense chapter. And then the next chapter with Isis is
a confusing
is
chapter.
confusing, but like confusing because it's more of a it's like an oh crap moment. She's like, really? That's how that works?
Yep. All right, so let's go through our little housekeeping and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
And
so you're listening to this on a Tuesday, and we thank you for following with us and joining us in this journey as we're not dissecting the book in the sense of we're just sharing what we're getting out of the chapters, and we hope that it intrigues you even more to potentially read the book, which we highly recommend. And we highly recommend going to Amazon, no sponsor, and picking up a copy of The Music Lesson by Victor Wooten. And we highly recommend you picking up a copy of The Spirit of Music by Victor Wooten, because it is, as much as Kyle said earlier, based upon what Victor Wooten said, it is a deeper version of this book. And it takes you deeper into his mindset. And it's very surreal when you read it. So thank you for listening. Keep on listening with us as we grow with this book. That being said, every Friday night, Kyle goes live on Twitch. So for those of you who are listening with him and joining him, thank you so much. Bring your friends and family with you. Every Sunday, we go live on Twitch at 7:30 p.m. We go for about 2.5 hours. And we typically do our best to align our music to what we're doing in the podcasts. As of now, when this episode comes out, our past Sunday episode, live show, would have featured Tina Turner's music, because when she had passed away prior to this episode coming out
today, actually.
Actually, the day we're recording, she passed away. So we like to do our best to celebrate that music. And so when our past Sunday will have been mainly Tina Turner music, talking a little bit about her and stuff like that. Then Mondays, Kyle's uploading our visual version of our podcast to YouTube. The episodes are about 3 or 4 weeks out from when they drop on all the fun podcast streaming services. So if you want to see us, please check that out. There is some little additive stuff in it because we don't really edit much.
There'll be a funny introduction to this one. So
there it is.
It won't be on the audio version. So.
And then every Friday, Kyle uploads some shorts to YouTube as well. So again, I've done this before, but I do thank Kyle for all the time and effort he puts into the editing and taking care of uploading the files and stuff like that. So that all being said, we have Instagram, we have Twitter, we have all that good stuff. All that's in our show notes. We have a Discord we'd love to discuss with you. So check out the show notes, click on our link tree. You'll see everything that's available. And I have nothing more.
And there's a new addition to our link tree that you should talk about as well.
The form.
Oh,
yes. June 11th, we are looking to do a live show based upon covers of songs. And we've been using this song as an example. The Sound of Silence, which was covered by Disturbed, and how we actually think it's a very well done cover. That's what we're talking about. One of your favorite bands or bands that have covered a song from another favorite band and you just thought it was one of those things that everybody needs to hear, in that Linktree link, yes, click on the Linktree link in the show notes and you will find the form that you can fill out, and please check it out. Currently we have a few responses. We still have 5 responses. Mm-hmm. And, share this out with your friends and family.
Stuart, Jacques, Michael, Philip, and Darren.
And we will be building a list of
almost did it with a straight face this time.
We will be building a list ourselves, but we would love to hear from everybody else so we can make this a part of the conversation. So check out the forum, fill it out, join us June 11th at 7:30, and we'll be playing those songs.
Thank you, everyone, for listening. So we'll
thank you.
Chat with you all next week. Have a good one.
Have a good one.
Thank you for listening to the Turn on the Music podcast. We hope that you join us next week. Click on the link tree in our show notes to follow us on Twitter and Instagram. You can also subscribe to our Twitch and YouTube channel. If you'd like to continue the conversation, join us on our Discord. If you like what you heard, please share it with a friend. And if you really want to help us promote the show, head over to Apple Podcasts or the podcast service of your choice and give us a 5-star rating. Remember, always share the music.
Thank you.